Sup guys, Zanderson 977 here today to do Tokyo Ghoul episode 8 review. Now, now in this episode of Tokyo Ghoul, right? This episode was a very emotional, very impactful, very touching episode of Tokyo Ghoul. Just as I have been saying last week with the whole human and ghoul fighting against each other dynamic, that cycle of hatred, the whole cycle of hurt, human killing ghouls and ghouls killing humans, and the cycle just never ends. This episode basically was the very epitome of all of that, right? It's the whole entire dynamic, going in depth, right? Very, very in depth in terms of the human consequences and the ghoul consequences. And we see that Kaneki is stuck right in the middle with his unique perspective because he was a human beforehand and now he's also a ghoul. And he even goes on to say, right, the scene with him fighting Amon, right, that scene with him fighting Amon, and he's basically saying to himself, like, why are we constantly trying to fight against one another, right? Ghouls, even though they hunt humans, they have feelings too, and it's not like they're consciously seeking out humans to devour them, right? It's more like an impulsive urge. It's what they need to do to survive, and they don't necessarily have to hunt and kill innocent people, right? They can just basically survive off suicide victims. That's one alternative, I guess, that was shown in this story. So they don't necessarily have to go out and hunt and eat humans like a wild animal would. It's not necessarily that sort of thing, even though you do have ghouls who are very sadistic and who will go out of their way to hunt and butcher people by the many thousands and etc. But it's like using the one bad apple to spoil a bunch. So it's not necessarily right or fair to label all ghouls in that kind of merciless, psychopathic killing spree type of thing, because not all of them are like that. As we see in the case of Kaneki, and he's basically coming to that realization. It's actually his own narration while he was fighting Amon. He basically comes to that realization, and it even reaches a point where he basically says that, okay, if you won't understand, then I'll make you understand. And then he begins taking hits willingly from Amon with his Quinky, right? Which is basically, it was revealed in this episode by Mado that yes, well, we more than likely, it's pretty obvious at this point, but the Quinky, which is the human weapon that they use to fight against ghouls, is actually made from Ghoul's own Kagune. So we are, as I said, it's pretty obvious at this point, but they said it explicitly nonetheless in this episode. So he was using his Quinky to basically beat down Kaneki, and he's basically coming, he's basically talking to Kaneki with his own internal struggle, in a sense, like he's asking him, why do ghouls hunt humans, why do they prey on the innocent, why this, why that. And Kaneki can really relate to that because he was human once before, so he knows exactly how this dude Amon is supposed to feel. But Kaneki, as I said before, now has this unique perspective where he's also a ghoul, not just human anymore, but he's also a ghoul. So he also knows how the ghouls feel. Right? They're not merciless wild beasts hunting down humans just to devour and torture them. That's not the case. These are basically people with real emotions, real feelings. It's just that they, for some unknown reason, and this is my opinion, the whole ghoul appetite thing, that seemed more like something that was manufactured, or basically like they probably captured this human and genetically mutated him so that he would hunt humans, and probably a side effect of that whole, or maybe they basically, okay, yeah, this is the idea, I should say. Maybe what actually happened, right, why ghouls actually came about, was maybe it was an experimentation to increase human abilities, like the kagunes that we see ghoul have, right? Maybe that was their intention, to basically give humans, more endurance, more agility, to give humans, in a sense, superhuman abilities with the use of these kagunes that we see the ghouls have. But maybe one of the big drawbacks, or one of the big side effects of these humans having these seemingly superhuman abilities is the fact that they need to consume human flesh in order to survive. So maybe it really wasn't like an experimentation gone wrong where they had these group of human subjects that they basically did experiments on to basically give them kagunes, these seemingly supernatural powers, and the side effect was, unfortunately, eating human flesh for them to stay alive. So it could be that, and whose fault is it? It's not necessarily the ghoul's fault. So this episode laid it out perfectly, and even in the case of Mother, right, we see him get killed um by Hinami. Well, not necessarily by Hinami, but Hinami was the one who dealt those fatal injuries to him, and Toka-chan was the one who dealt the final blow. And even when he got that blow, right, he was basically wanting to live and wanting to get revenge for something that happened to him seemingly in his past so much that he basically tried fighting against the ghosts to his last breath, right? Even when this dude was on the verge of dying, right? It's pretty obvious at that point. His right arm was gone and he was basically crawling on the ground. There was nothing left for him basically to live anymore. He was still determined, saying something about that one-eyed person, right? I'm sure that it's not Kaneki that he's talking about. More than likely someone else, probably a ghoul in this case, because he's human and he's hunting ghouls with the CCG. So something, maybe this one-eyed ghoul out there did something very detrimental to him, and he wants revenge for that. Because even when Toka-chan was basically looking at the fact that he hates ghouls so much that he uses a glove, that's not the case. We see when his glove was taken off that it's actually a ring on his hand. That ring, what it means, what it symbolizes, I have no idea. But Toka-chan basically got something from that. She realized what it meant, and it basically shook her to her core. She was shaken in that situation when she saw the ring on Mado's arm for some reason. But this constant fighting, Kaneki has a unique perspective. So even when in the case of Kaneki's and Amon's fight, right, when Kaneki basically decided that, look here, no matter what, he can't allow Amon to go to where Mado and the others are. So he will use anything that he has to use, and he basically decides that, okay, he'll use his ghoul powers. This is the first time that we've seen Kaneki willingly embrace his ghoul powers in a fight to try to stop someone else. And it does have its drawbacks, just as I was explaining before. So he uses his Kagune. He first bites off a piece of Amon's flesh to bring out the ghoul powers, the ghoul Kagune, and then uses that to break Amon's Quinky. And in breaking Amon's Quinky, when he realized that the fight was basically over, he doesn't need to do anything more than beyond this point, or at least his human mind was saying that. He was basically trying to tell Amon to run away from him as fast as possible, as much as he can, because he was being overcome with his whole appetite, his whole urges to eat. He was having real difficulty controlling himself in that way. And he even went as far as to basically wound Amon, even though still pushing him away far enough for Amon to get away. Amon was perplexed as to why that Ghoul will let him live, but it served him nonetheless. And we see Kaneki there struggling to gain composure, while one of his own brethren, in a sense, one of his own, another ghoul showed up, which is Yomo, showed up behind him. And because he was so overcome with this appetite urge, he fatally, he did this fatal strike to this person, wanting to realize that it was Yomo. All Yomo did basically was took out a piece of meat and said, here, this should help you. Kaneki instantly realized that, whoa, this is Yomo. What did I do? Did I injure him? And his group was instantly dispersed. And before that actually happened, Yomo was saying that, no, he knows why Mr. Yoshimura, which is the old dude that owns Anteku, he says that no, he knows why Mr. Yoshimura is so interested in Kaneki, because I believe that Yomo basically saw unique perspective that Kaneki has in relation to the ghouls and humans, and also the mere fact of Kaneki trying to, in his way, help the situation, right? he basically stopped Amon when he needed to, and he, even though it wasn't going all according to plan, but he did his best to get Amon away from him, trying not to eat him. So Yomo realizes that Kaneki really has a heart to help this situation in some way with his unique perspective, and he says that now he knows why Mr. Yoshimura is so interested in him. I believe not just for his good powers, but for his unique perspective and what his own and what his whole existence signifies as well. Him being half ghoul and half human, signifying that there can be some reconciliation between the humans and the ghouls, because if there's some reconciliation in a person for them to be half ghoul and half human, it must can manifest in a way where there is some agreement between two seemingly human factions, the humans and the ghouls. So I believe overall this episode was very emotional, very tear jerking in some instances. And in the case of Hinami, right, even though her mother and father was killed and Toka-chan told her to finish off Mado, she said she didn't want to do it. All she wanted to do was to be with mom and dad again. She doesn't necessarily want all this fighting, she just wants to be with mom and dad. But as mentioning, as in this case of mentioning Hinami, I definitely have to discuss her abilities. Now, Mado, right? We see him use two Quinkies in this episode. We see him use the Quinky of the Quinky, the first Quinky, which has the Kagune of her father, and the second Quinky, which has the Kagune of her mother. And Hinami, seemingly in this case, I'm not sure if all ghoul offsprings are like this, where they have the abilities of both their father and their mother, but in this case Hinami has both the abilities of her father and her mother, and the Kagune abilities, that is. And it really made Mado excited and perplexed and saying that he was perfect. I believe even in terms of ghoul standards, she has some very unique powers, right? Not just in that respect, but also in terms of her smell, her sense of smell. She was able to pick up her mother's scent, from many yards away, many meters away, for a very good long distance, I believe, right? And upon coming to this case where it looks like it was her mother's handbag, I believe that what was in that bag was basically her decapitated mother's head. That is why she was holding on to it and saying that it's her mom. So I believe that she has the unique ability not just of having both the Kagunes of her mother and father, but also having this very strong, unique, powerful sense of smell. We don't necessarily see other ghouls have such a strong sense of smell as we've seen Hinami demonstrates. But overall, I thought that, as I said, this episode of Tokyo Ghoul was very impactful, very emotional, and I believe that yes, it was an awesome episode. So overall, that's it. That's my review. Remember to rate, comment, subscribe. Sayonara.